The galaxy had a reputation for being cruel. Wars were common. Entire planets fell in days. Empires rose and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Among the many species that dominated the stars, humans were considered weak, short-lived, and insignificant. Most aliens thought humans were fragile, emotional, and unworthy of notice. Elias Hale, a human engineer, had heard these opinions his entire life. He had left Earth years ago in search of work, traveling from one trade hub to another. His skills were ordinary, his ship barely better than a floating tin can. But he had something most humans lacked, a stubborn sense of morality. He could not run from danger if someone needed help, no matter how small the chance of survival. That morning, Elias was transporting cargo through the Aurelian sector, a dangerous region near the edge of Imperial space. The space lanes were crowded with merchants, smugglers, and military vessels. He had been warned about raider groups that attacked convoy ships, but warnings were usually ignored. The Aurelian Empire was wealthy and defended, but the frontier was chaotic. Elias' sensors picked up a distress signal. It was weak, irregular, and almost impossible to trace. Curiosity tugged at him, but it was also fear. His ship was small, and raiders often destroyed anyone who investigated. He could have ignored it. Most humans would have. But something in the pattern of the signal made his pulse quicken. It was a royal signature, faint but unmistakable. His mind raced. The message was from the royal convoy of the Aurelian Star Dominion, carrying the Empire's young heir and the royal family. The convoy was under attack, shields failing, engines crippled. Raiders were surrounding them, weapons far superior to the convoy's defenses. Most ships would have fled. Most soldiers would have abandoned their post to save their own lives. The galaxy's law was simple: survival first, loyalty second. That law had kept countless civilizations alive. But Elias did not follow the galaxy's law. He did not even hesitate. He engaged his ship's thrusters and changed course. He was tiny compared to the Imperial battleships. His weapons were laughable. His hull could barely withstand a scratch, yet he flew straight into the chaos. Every warning system blared, but he ignored them. The raiders noticed him immediately. Their weapons locked onto his ship. He was too small to be threatening, but they fired anyway, expecting an easy kill. Elias felt his ship shudder as lasers tore through his shields. Sparks flew across the cockpit. Alarms screamed. Systems failed one by one. Still, he did not turn back. Through the sensors, he saw the royal vessel, badly damaged and drifting. The life signs were weak, but there, he detected them. The small child of the royal family, a fragile life that could decide the future of the empire. No thought of reward, no thought of glory, only the child's life mattered. Elias positioned his ship between the raiders and the royal vessel. He used his own weak hull as a shield. Every strike shook him violently, but he held his course. His ship screamed under the impact, but he focused on one thing: survival of the royal bloodline. Inside the royal vessel, the queen watched through damaged security cameras. Fear gripped her heart as she saw the lone human appear in the battlefield. Her trained guards were retreating. Every pilot she trusted had abandoned her convoy. Yet here was this human, small and fragile, daring to challenge a fleet of raiders. The queen whispered to herself, disbelief in her voice. The human ship absorbed shot after shot, sparks and smoke trailing behind it. Shields flickered and died, engines failed partially, but the ship remained in place. It was as if the human had no fear of death, only a determination she could not understand. Time slowed. The royal child was too young to understand danger, but sensors showed weak vital signs. The child's survival depended entirely on this human. The raiders had no reason to stop, yet somehow the human drew their attention, giving the royal vessel a small window to stabilize. One raider ship moved closer, aiming a final shot. Elias felt the controls shake violently. His vision blurred from stress and fear. He pressed forward, and the shot that could have destroyed the child struck his own ship instead. Fire erupted. Metal twisted. Smoke filled the cabin. He coughed, fighting to stay conscious. He could have escaped. He could have turned, fled, and survived. No one would blame him. But when he glanced at the sensors and saw the child, everything else became meaningless. With a final surge, Elias rammed his ship through the raiders' path, disrupting their attack long enough for the royal vessel to recover shields and propulsion. Alarms blared in both ships, warning of imminent destruction. Sparks flew. Hull integrity warning screamed. But the royal child was safe. Moments later, Imperial reinforcements arrived, chasing the raiders away. They found the human ship damaged beyond repair, drifting like a broken star in space. But they also found something incredible. The human was alive. Somehow, against all odds, Elias had survived. He crawled out of his burning cockpit, coughing and bruised, but standing. He had no weapon left, no shields, no ship, but he had succeeded. The Queen ordered the shuttle to bring him aboard. Guards surrounded him, suspicious and angry, expecting an outsider to have selfish motives. But Elias merely nodded, exhausted, trying to explain that he had only done what anyone should do. The Queen's eyes softened as she examined him. She had seen loyalty, courage, and sacrifice in her empire's best soldiers, but never like this. Not from a human, not from someone so small, so fragile, so determined. She whispered again, almost to herself. It was something different, something alien civilizations rarely understood. Humans could choose to protect others, even when there was no reward, even when survival seemed impossible. The Queen's guards stared at him, confused. No human had ever stood so firm, so selfless, and so unafraid. They whispered among themselves. The galaxy had underestimated humans. Perhaps for the first time, they began to wonder if their assumptions were wrong. Elias sat in the palace's recovery chamber. He was battered and exhausted, but he did not feel proud. He had not sought recognition. He had only acted. And yet he could sense that something had changed. His actions had ripple effects he could not yet imagine. The Queen entered quietly. She did not shout, nor did she demand explanations. She looked at him carefully, almost measuring his soul. "You have saved the life of the heir," she said softly, "and for that you have changed the fate of this empire." Elias shook his head. I did what anyone should do." The Queen smiled faintly, her expression a mixture of awe and curiosity. "Perhaps humans see the universe differently. Perhaps your kind is stronger than we imagined." Outside, the galaxy moved on as always. Wars would rage, planets would burn, and empires would rise and fall. But here, in this quiet palace, a human had done the impossible. Against overwhelming odds, he had saved a royal child. And in doing so, he had planted the seed of change, one that could alter the galaxy forever. Elias did not know it yet, but this moment would mark the beginning of a story that no one, not even the Queen, could have predicted. He had stepped into a world that underestimated him, yet he had already begun to redefine it. The Queen stood there, her gaze unwavering. The galaxy whispered in shock and wonder, and one thought rang clearly in her mind. This human, he is unlike any other. And now he belongs to us. Elias woke to the soft hum of machinery and the gentle glow of crystal walls. He had been carried into the palace after collapsing from exhaustion. His body ached in ways he had never imagined. Every muscle screamed in protest. His skin burned where sparks had scorched it, and the taste of smoke lingered in his throat. But his mind was alert. He remembered everything: the attack, the raiders, the royal child, and the impossible odds he had faced. The room was silent except for the distant echoes of footsteps outside. He sat up slowly, testing his strength, and tried to recall what had happened next. The memory of the Queen's eyes burned in his mind, her gaze filled with curiosity, disbelief, and something else, respect. He had never thought of himself as special. He was just a human doing what he believed was right. But here, in this alien palace, he could feel that his actions had changed something fundamental. The door slid open. A tall figure entered, adorned in ceremonial robes that glimmered under the palace lights. Guards flanked him, their faces expressionless, but their eyes sharp and alert. The figure was an advisor of the queen, a high-ranking member of the Imperial Council. He stopped a few steps away from Elias and regarded him coolly. "You are the human who intervened," the advisor said, his voice firm and measured. "You are the reason the royal child survives. But understand this, your presence here is unexpected." Elias swallowed, trying to speak, but his throat felt dry. I just did what anyone should have done." The advisor's eyes narrowed slightly. "Few humans would, most would have fled. Most would have abandoned the child and saved themselves. You did not." Before Elias could respond, another presence filled the room, the queen herself. She moved gracefully, her robes flowing like liquid silver. She studied him carefully, taking in every detail. She did not smile, did not speak immediately. Her gaze lingered on him as if measuring his heart, weighing the value of his soul. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but commanding. "Elias Hale, you have done what no one else would. You have saved the life of my child. By the laws of the Aurelian Empire, this creates a debt, one that cannot be repaid with mere words or gold." Elias frowned, confused. "Debt? I didn't expect anything. I didn't do it for reward." The queen stepped closer, her eyes steady. "That is precisely why your actions matter. You acted without thought of gain. You acted with courage. You acted with selflessness. These qualities, these choices, are rare among all species, even among my own people." The royal advisor shifted uncomfortably. "Your Majesty, a human is an outsider. They do not belong in our court. Claiming him may be seen as unusual, even dangerous. Other species may not understand." The queen's gaze hardened. "It does not matter what others think. Laws of honor are clear. Anyone who protects the royal bloodline becomes bound to it. They owe more than wealth. They owe loyalty. They owe themselves." Elias blinked, trying to process her words. "Bound to you, to the empire." "Yes," she said simply. "You belong to us now, Elias, not as a servant, not as a prisoner, but as someone under our protection, someone whose life is intertwined with the future of the empire." He shook his head, disbelief written across his face. I don't want this. I didn't ask for this. I just did what was right." The queen nodded. "That is exactly why it matters. Humans act in ways others cannot understand. You have shown loyalty, bravery, and the courage to face death without hesitation. That is more than we can expect from anyone else." The room was silent for a moment. The advisor stepped forward cautiously. "Your Majesty, claiming a human so publicly, it may provoke the neighboring systems. They may see this as favoritism, as a political maneuver. Our alliances may be questioned." The queen's expression remained calm. "Let them question. This human's actions speak louder than politics. He has shown the value of courage, sacrifice, and morality, qualities my empire needs now more than ever. If the galaxy cannot see that, it is their failure, not his." Elias tried to speak again, but no words came. His heart raced. His mind spun. He had only wanted to save a child. Now he was entangled in laws, honor, and a fate he had never imagined. Over the following days, he began to understand the weight of the queen's decree. He was given quarters in the palace, not a prison cell but a place under constant watch. Royal guards studied his movements, curious and wary. Advisors asked questions about his ship, his life, his skills. The court whispered about him in corridors and dining halls. A human, small, fragile, and unexpected, had entered the highest circles of the Aurelian Empire. Yet amidst the scrutiny, Elias noticed subtle changes. The royal child, safe and healthy, began to smile when he entered the room. The child's presence reminded him why he had risked everything. Despite the grandeur of the palace, despite the laws and debts he did not fully understand, The child's life was proof that his choice mattered. One evening, the queen called him to her private chamber. The room was warm, the walls lined with glowing crystals. She gestured for him to sit. "You may not understand it yet," she began, "but the life you saved is not just a child's. It is the future of this empire. Your actions, they have changed the path of history." Elias listened quietly. "I didn't think about history, I just couldn't let them die." The queen's eyes softened. "That is what makes you remarkable. Most beings act out of fear or desire. You acted purely out of choice. That choice creates a bond stronger than any oath or command. By saving the child, you have placed yourself in our care, in our trust, and in our expectations. You are bound by honor, whether you wish it or not." Elias felt the weight of her words pressing down on him. He had never wanted power. He had never wanted fame or influence. And yet here he was, thrust into a position where his actions could shape an empire. The queen continued, "You may leave if you choose, but know this, without you the royal line may have been extinguished. That possibility cannot be ignored. The galaxy may never forgive itself for what almost happened, and the empire will remember you always." For the first time, Elias realized the magnitude of what he had done. He had not only saved a life, he had saved a lineage, a civilization, and perhaps the balance of power in the galaxy. The weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders. Over the next days, he was introduced to various members of the court. Nobles who once ignored humans now watched him with curiosity. Advisors who dismissed outsiders now sought his opinion on minor matters, testing his reactions. Even the royal guards, skeptical at first, began to respect the human who had stood where their strongest warriors had failed. Despite the attention, Elias remained humble. He did not seek praise. He did not demand recognition. He simply went about learning the ways of the court, understanding the customs, and quietly assisting where he could. But not everyone was pleased. Whispers spread among alien nobles. "Why does the queen favor a human?" they murmured. "He is fragile, untrained, unworthy." Others feared that his presence could disrupt alliances. Yet no matter how they spoke, the queen's words remained firm. "He belongs to us now." One afternoon, a senior advisor confronted Elias privately. "You must understand," he said, voice low, "your presence here is not without consequence. Other species may attempt to challenge you, to test the loyalty of the queen. Humans are not meant to wield influence in this empire. You may survive or you may perish. Your choices will determine your fate." Elias nodded slowly. "I only know one thing. I will protect the child whatever it takes. That is all I promised myself." The advisor studied him, perhaps for the first time seeing the resolve that the queen had praised. "Perhaps humans are not as weak as we assumed." As days turned into weeks, Elias began to notice subtle changes in the palace. Guards and attendants treated him differently. Even the royal child grew attached to him, reaching for his hand and laughing when he entered the room. The bonds of trust and protection were forming, not because of law alone, but because Elias' actions inspired loyalty. Then came the day when the queen summoned him to the Grand Council Hall. The room was filled with representatives of the empire, dignitaries, and advisors from far-off systems. All eyes turned to Elias, the human who had saved the royal bloodline. Murmurs filled the chamber. The queen's voice rang clear and commanding. "No one may question his place here." The hall fell silent. Aliens from countless species exchanged uneasy glances. Some were skeptical, others were in awe. And Elias, standing quietly at the center, felt the weight of what had just been declared. He was no longer an outsider. He was part of something larger than himself. And though he did not yet fully understand it, he knew his life had changed forever. The Aurelian Empire had always prided itself on strength. Its armies were disciplined, its fleets vast, and its warriors trained from birth. Yet despite all this power, the empire had weaknesses: arrogance, rigid rules, and a reliance on technology over instinct. For centuries, alien species had assumed humans were weak. And yet here was Elias Hale, a single human, quietly turning the Empire's assumptions upside down. It began with small things. The Queen, impressed by his courage, asked him to observe the palace's security protocols. Guards expected him to fail. Advisors thought his input would be irrelevant. But Elias noticed patterns they had overlooked: gaps in patrol schedules, blind spots in sensor arrays, flaws in communication channels. He suggested simple changes: staggered shifts, redundant alert systems, even basic drills for civilians in case of emergencies. The advisors scoffed. "These are minor improvements," they said. "They will not prevent a serious attack." Elias shrugged. "It's not about one attack. It's about being ready for all possibilities. Humans survive because they adapt, not because they have the biggest weapons." The Queen listened carefully. Her gaze lingered on him longer than usual. She began to see a truth the Empire had long ignored. Humans possessed a combination of intelligence, courage, and intuition that was rare among her people. Weeks later, the Empire faced a threat that tested this lesson. Scouts reported a raider fleet approaching a border planet. These raiders were notorious: fast, merciless, and impossible to predict. The Empire's fleet mobilized immediately, relying on brute force and the latest warships. Yet the advisors hesitated when Elias offered his plan. "I am not a strategist of war," Elias said, standing before the council, "but I know how to protect the people and win without needless death. We cannot fight like them. We must fight smart." He proposed a new approach. Rather than attacking directly, the Empire's forces would use a combination of diversion, coordinated retreats, and traps to neutralize the raiders. It relied not on overwhelming firepower, but on precise timing, trust, and human ingenuity. The advisors exchanged worried glances. "You want to teach our fleet how to fight differently, to abandon their instincts," one whispered. The Queen stood, her voice firm. "We will follow him. If he saved my child, he knows more about courage than anyone here." And so, for the first time, a human's ideas guided the Aurelian fleet. The battle began at dawn. Sensor readings showed the raiders approaching in waves. The fleet moved according to Elias' plan. Smaller ships acted as bait, drawing the raiders into carefully prepared zones. Larger vessels waited hidden, ready to strike at the right moment. Civilians on the planet were moved to safe locations using the new evacuation protocols Elias had suggested. At first, it seemed like chaos. The fleet's movements appeared counterintuitive, even reckless. Officers whispered in confusion. Raiders laughed, assuming the Empire was panicking. But Elias' intuition proved correct. The raiders fell into traps, their formation disrupted. When the Aurelian fleet struck, it was precise and devastating. Not indiscriminate destruction, but calculated force. Ships were disabled, not destroyed, allowing the Empire to capture valuable intelligence. Civilians were unharmed. The raiders were forced to retreat, humiliated and defeated without the Empire losing a single soldier. The advisors stared in disbelief. The Queen's face shone with pride. And Elias felt something unfamiliar: recognition. He had not sought it, but he realized his approach had worked because it respected life and relied on courage, discipline, and adaptability. Word of the victory spread quickly across the Empire. Aliens who had mocked humans began to whisper differently. Humans were fragile, yes, but their minds, how they fought, how they protected each other, were formidable. The Empire began to see that power did not lie solely in weapons or numbers. It lay in choices, loyalty, and moral courage. As days passed, Elias became more involved. He worked with engineers to repair damaged ships, with soldiers to improve their coordination, and even with civilians to teach resilience and adaptability. Wherever he went, people noticed his calm demeanor, his methodical approach, and his willingness to lead without demanding praise. The royal child, now recovering fully, grew attached to him. Small hands would reach for him, eyes would light up when he entered a room. Elias would smile softly, understanding that protection was not just about strength, it was about connection. This bond, simple yet profound, reminded him why he had risked his life in the first place. Yet, not everyone welcomed the change. Some nobles feared that Elias' influence would undermine their authority. "A human is guiding our empire," they muttered. "He is shaping our armies, our strategies. He is becoming more than we can control." The queen, however, was unwavering. "His guidance is proof of honor and courage. If we follow him, we honor the law, the empire, and our people. That is what matters." As another threat loomed, a neighboring system considering an invasion, the queen asked Elias to design a defense strategy. He spent hours studying maps, analyzing enemy capabilities, and predicting their moves. Unlike the advisors who relied solely on past tactics, Elias considered human unpredictability, using the enemy's assumptions against them. When the battle came, Elias' strategy again proved successful. The enemy expected the Aurelian fleet to engage head-on. Instead, they faced a series of ambushes, clever diversions, and rapid adaptations. Ships that should have been destroyed survived, and critical installations were protected. The enemy fleet withdrew, demoralized and frustrated. The empire's leaders began to realize that the human was not just a soldier or an advisor. He was a force that changed the way they thought. Humans did not simply fight. They understood sacrifice, protection, and calculated courage in ways alien species rarely grasped. One evening, after another successful defense, Elias walked through the palace gardens. The crystal pathways reflected the twin moons above. The air was cool, carrying the scent of alien blossoms. The queen joined him, silent at first, watching the young human who had so profoundly altered her empire. "You have done more than protect my child," she said softly. "You have protected the empire, its people, and its honor. Your choices have changed how we think, how we fight, how we live." Elias shook his head. "I only do what I think is right. I don't seek praise or power. I just can't ignore what is in front of me." The queen smiled faintly. "That is what makes you extraordinary. Most beings act from fear, ambition, or duty. You act from choice. That choice is more powerful than any weapon." Elias felt a strange warmth. He had faced death, chaos, and impossible odds, yet he had never imagined that the simple act of protecting others could ripple through an empire. He realized then that heroism was not about glory. It was about action, integrity, and connection. Over time, his influence grew. Soldiers learned to respect his guidance, engineers followed his suggestions, and even skeptical nobles began to see the value in his approach. The empire adapted, not because of fear, not because of orders, but because of human insight. And through it all, the queen never wavered in her support. She ensured that no one could challenge his place in the palace. She understood that the human's loyalty and courage were treasures more valuable than fleets of ships or armies of warriors. Elias, once a simple engineer, had become something else entirely, a symbol, not of conquest, but of humanity's unique ability to protect, endure, and inspire. The empire had seen a small human face death and fear without hesitation, and in doing so, had learned that true strength came from choices, compassion, and courage. The galaxy began to whisper. Humans were no longer merely fragile outsiders. They were beings whose loyalty and courage could shape empires. And the Aurelian Empire, once proud and rigid, had learned to follow a human's example. Elias walked through the corridors of the palace that night, thinking of the battles, the strategies, and the lives he had helped protect. He had never sought recognition, yet he had earned respect that would ripple across the galaxy for generations. He realized that the life he had saved, the life of a single child, was only the beginning. That choice had ignited a change that no one could stop. And somewhere deep inside, Elias understood that the Empire, the royal child, and even the Queen had changed him as much as he had changed them. He had stepped into a world that underestimated him, and through courage, intelligence, and moral strength, he had reshaped it forever. The human had become more than a protector. He had become a force of change, a quiet, steadfast example of what it truly meant to be heroic, and the galaxy had no choice but to notice. The council hall was enormous. Crystal pillars reflected the light of distant stars, and the ceiling soared high above, decorated with banners representing the countless worlds of the Aurelian Empire. Today, it was unusually silent. All attention was on one person, Elias Hale, the human who had saved the royal bloodline and in doing so had earned a place in the empire no outsider had ever held. The queen sat on her elevated throne, her posture regal, her gaze fixed firmly on Elias. Around her were the empire's most powerful leaders, advisors, and nobles. Some looked curious, some skeptical, others openly hostile. All had gathered for the council meeting that would decide not only Elias' future but the perception of humanity in the galaxy. A senior advisor stood first, his voice filled with controlled authority. "Your Majesty, this human, he is an outsider, fragile, untested in politics, inexperienced in warfare among the stars. Should we not return him to his own kind? He has no place among us." A murmur ran through the hall. Many nodded, agreeing. Others whispered to themselves. They had all watched as Elias had quietly reshaped strategies and guided the Empire's defenses. Some feared his influence. Some envied it. But all had to admit that the results were undeniable. Victories with minimal loss, civilians protected, and lessons taught that could not be ignored. The Queen's voice rang out, calm but firm. "Elias Hale is no ordinary human. He has acted where trained warriors faltered. He has shown courage where seasoned leaders hesitated. He has protected the life of my child and through that act preserved the future of this empire. His choices have changed our ways and for that he belongs with us." The hall fell silent again. The advisor's brow furrowed. "Belongs with us. He is not one of us. He is human. He cannot understand our laws, our culture, our traditions." Elias stepped forward, unarmed, calm, and measured. He did not raise his voice. He did not argue angrily. He only spoke the truth he had lived by since saving the royal child. "I am human," he said softly but firmly, "and I do not pretend to be anything else. I am not like you in many ways. I do not understand all your laws and I cannot claim your culture as my own. But I have learned that courage, loyalty, and compassion are universal. They do not belong to one species, one culture, or one throne. I acted to protect a life, and through that action I chose what was right. If that is what it means to belong here, then I accept it, not for honor, not for glory, but because it is right." A hush fell over the room. The council members had not expected such humility and clarity. It was not arrogance, nor defiance, nor even desperation. They had seen humans act recklessly in fiction, but here was one who spoke with moral authority, quiet strength, and a courage that could not be challenged. The Queen's hand rested gently on the arm of her throne. "Do you hear that?" she asked, her voice soft but carrying across the chamber. "This is the essence of what it means to belong to this empire. Strength is not measured by the size of your fleet, the firepower of your ships, or the sharpness of your sword. Strength is measured by courage, loyalty, and the choices we make to protect those we value. Elias has proven that he possesses these qualities in abundance." The council was divided. Some aliens still whispered that humans were weak, fragile, unpredictable. Others, however, had seen Elias' guidance in action. The strategic victories, the protection of civilians, the changes to military and civilian protocols that had saved countless lives. They began to see that human courage was not measured in physical strength alone, but in willingness to act when it mattered most. Another advisor, one of the older and wiser members of the council, spoke up cautiously. "Your Majesty, perhaps we have judged humans too quickly. Perhaps the galaxy has underestimated them. This human has acted with wisdom beyond his years, with courage beyond his species' reputation. Maybe it is time we recognize value where we find it, not where we expect it." A ripple of agreement ran through the council. Eyes that had once doubted Elias now regarded him with respect. Whispers became nods. Alien leaders began to realize that humans, though small and seemingly fragile, could influence and inspire in ways no one had imagined. The Queen rose. Her voice, calm and unwavering, filled the chamber. "Elias Hale is not a servant. He is not a tool. He is under our protection, yes, but more than that, he is a symbol that courage, morality, and choice define true strength. By our laws and our honor, he belongs to this empire. By his actions, he belongs in the hearts of all who value life and courage." She extended her hand toward him. "Elias Hale, stand before your peers. Let them see the human who saved the royal bloodline, guided our armies, and taught us that strength comes from more than weapons and numbers. Let them understand that courage is not limited to species, but is universal." Elias stepped forward, heart steady, head high. He did not kneel. He did not demand respect. He simply stood as he was, a human who had acted when others hesitated, who had protected life at the cost of his own safety. A silence fell. The entire hall seemed to hold its breath. Then the Queen spoke again, slowly, clearly, for all to hear. "He is no longer an outsider. He is no longer just a visitor in our halls. He is one of us. He belongs to this empire, not as a subject but as an example. He has shown us the value of courage, of choice, and of loyalty. From this day forward, Elias Hale shall be recognized as part of the Aurelian Empire, and no one shall question his place or his actions." The hall erupted, not in chaos, but in the quiet murmur of acceptance. Some aliens nodded reluctantly, some smiled, and some bowed in recognition. The galaxy had underestimated humans for centuries, but here, in the Grand Council chamber of the Aurelian Empire, one human had proven that bravery, morality, and the willingness to act could transcend species, culture, and expectation. Elias felt a strange warmth in his chest. He had never sought recognition. He had never acted for glory. But in this moment, he understood that his choices, the ones that had begun simply with the desire to protect a child, had changed more than one life. They had changed a lineage, an empire, and perhaps the entire galaxy's perception of humanity. The Queen approached him, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. "You have done more than save a life. You have reminded us of what it truly means to lead, to fight, and to protect. You are one of us, Elias Hale. The Empire owes you more than words can express, but you ask for none. That is the truest courage of all." Elias looked at her, humbled. "I only did what I could. I never expected this." "And that is why it matters," the Queen replied. "True strength does not seek recognition. True courage acts regardless of reward. You have given us all a lesson that cannot be taught in books or drills. The galaxy will remember it, and so will we." From that day forward, humans were no longer seen as weak, fragile outsiders. Aliens spoke differently about them, watched them differently, and treated them with a cautious respect that had previously been reserved only for the strongest alien warriors. And among those humans, stories would spread of a single engineer named Elias Hale who had saved a royal child, reshaped the Empire's way of thinking, and earned a place in history not by force, but by courage, loyalty, and moral action. Elias walked the palace halls in quiet contemplation. Guards and advisors no longer whispered about him with skepticism. Instead, they watched with respect. The royal child ran to greet him each day, laughter and joy brightening the cold crystal corridors. The empire had changed, not through conquest but through the courage and choices of one human. As he looked out over the city from the palace balcony, lights twinkling like distant stars, he felt a sense of calm. He had not sought power. He had not sought recognition. He had only acted with integrity. And yet, his actions had shifted the fate of an empire and opened the galaxy to the possibility that humans were more than fragile beings. They were courageous, resilient, and capable of inspiring others to greatness. The Queen stood beside him silently, her presence steady and reassuring. "The galaxy will always underestimate you," she said quietly, "but never doubt your value. You have proven it in ways no one else could." Elias nodded, the weight of his journey settling on him. "I never wanted to be important," he said softly. "I just wanted to do what was right. And that," the Queen replied, "is what makes you extraordinary, and now you are one of us." The stars above the palace shimmered, vast and infinite. Somewhere across the galaxy, humans would be underestimated again. But thanks to Elias, one human had shown the universe that courage, loyalty, and moral strength were forces no species could ignore. And in the hearts of the Aurelian Empire, he would be remembered forever, not as an outsider, not as a visitor, but as one of their own. Elias Hale, the human who had saved a royal child, reshaped an empire and taught the galaxy the true meaning of courage, finally understood what it meant to belong. And in doing so, he had changed the course of history.